Because I was born dark like charcoal, I was betrothed as a baby. Just because I was born with skin as dark as charcoal, my childhood best friend despised me. One day, he pointed at me and said, "Uncle Carter, this baby girl is so ugly. No one's ever gonna marry her. Why don't you give her to me? I'll raise her to be my wife." And before anyone could say anything, he took off the necklace he was wearing and hung it around my neck. "This is my engagement token," he declared solemnly. "From now on, she belongs to me." Everyone was stunned by his bold move. The Carter family, after snapping out of their shock, somehow found the whole thing perfectly reasonable. My own father didn't hesitate for a second before agreeing. Me? I was barely a month old. I had no idea I'd just been sold off by my heartless dad, and so, a silent agreement was reached between both families. Young Mason Carter boldly picked me up and placed me into his arms. "Come on, Mason Jr., hold tight to your little wifey," someone joked. Mason was glowing with excitement. He hugged me tightly and sat down on the couch, teasing me. He poked my chubby cheeks with his finger. I was tiny in his arms but seemed to really enjoy the attention. I even gave him a big bright smile. That smile made him reconsider. Maybe I wasn't that ugly after all. Then, as if one-upping his own engagement token, Mason looked thoughtful. "Since he gave me a gift, shouldn't I give him one too?" So, in front of both stunned families, he leaned forward and gave me a gentle kiss on my lips. "You don't have anything to give me right now," he said seriously, "so that kiss will be your interest. You can pay me back later." His words left both families frozen in place, and just like that, my very first kiss was stolen, without me even knowing. I giggled like a little fool. Mason didn't care about the shocked expressions around him. He just kept poking my cheeks and whispered happily, "You're mine now. You've been marked. You're not allowed to kiss anyone else. Remember, you're not allowed to kiss anyone else." That's what little Elena said seriously, not even knowing what a kiss meant yet. By the time Elena turned 4, her father, Mr. Grayson, began feeling jealous. His wife was spending too much time taking care of their daughter, and he was being neglected, so he came up with a plan. Using the excuse of going on a trip around the world, he tricked little Elena into going to Mason's house. Mason hadn't seen Elena in over 2 years. When he opened the door and saw her, he froze. It took him a moment to even recognize who she was. In the past 2 years, he had completely forgotten the things he'd once said and done, those bold, embarrassing childhood declarations. That day, regret quietly crept into his heart. Seeing Mr. Grayson confidently handing Elena over, Mason forced a smile and spoke with a straight face, "Don't worry, sir. I'll take good care of Elena." Mr. Grayson smiled, pleased. "Elena, sweetheart, have fun here, okay? Daddy will come back to pick you up soon." After giving Mason a few more instructions, Mr. Grayson quickly turned and left. Only after her father left did Elena suddenly realize what was happening. She burst into loud sobs. "Daddy. I want Daddy." Her tiny hands were still clutching a lollipop, and every now and then, she'd stick out her tongue to lick it. The sight was both heartbreaking and oddly cute. Mason felt a headache coming on. He tried to calm her down. All right, stop crying." But Mason had no experience comforting kids, so his words came out sounding a little too stern. To Elena, it was like he was scolding her, and so she cried even louder. This time, she even threw away her beloved lollipop. "Wah! Big brother yelled at me. He's so mean. I want my daddy." As she sobbed, she kept tattling on Mason. He was speechless, but couldn't bring himself to let her cry forever. Taking a deep breath, he softened his voice as much as possible. "Elena, be a good girl. Don't cry, okay? If you keep crying, you won't look pretty anymore." It worked, because every little girl, even at 4 years old, wants to be pretty. Elena sniffled, wiped her tears, and said through her sobs, "Elena's a pretty princess." Hick. She claimed she wasn't crying anymore, but the tears kept falling. Mason couldn't help but chuckle softly, holding back his laughter. He continued patiently coaxing her. All right. Don't cry anymore. I already know, Elena is the most beautiful of all, as long as she behaves." Elena continued crying. "Daddy said he'd come pick me up soon. But Daddy lied. He said he'd take me to a super fun place with a beautiful princess room and lots of yummy food. But there's no princess room here, no delicious food. Just a mean big brother. It's not fun at all." So that's why she was crying so hard. Mason immediately understood and realized how to calm her down. "Your daddy didn't lie," Mason said, thinking quickly. "There is a beautiful princess room here. And there are lots of yummy treats. But only for good girls who don't cry. Really? Elena stopped crying, her big round eyes staring straight at him. Of course, Mason smiled. Do you want to stay in the princess room? He already knew the answer. This little girl had totally fallen into his trap. I won't cry anymore. I want the princess room. She quickly wiped the tears from her cheeks. All right, Mason said, nodding. But not just yet. First, let's go eat something tasty, okay? As he spoke, he gently pinched her chubby little cheeks. After changing into clean clothes, Elena looked much fresher. Her tiny hand still held onto her lollipop, and her face was clean and bright. Mason's car stopped in front of a Western-style restaurant. The moment the two of them walked in, they drew everyone's attention. Both children were strikingly beautiful. Mason had a calm, cool face that already held a trace of maturity. His aloof expression didn't stop the nearby girls from staring at him in admiration. Meanwhile, Elena beamed like a flower in bloom. Her bright smile made everyone want to scoop her up and smother her in kisses. After she finished devouring a whole table full of sweet treats, Mason decided to take her to the shopping mall. He wanted to buy some decorations to help set up the promised princess room. As they passed by a toy store, Elena pressed her face to the glass and pointed excitedly, Mason, I want that Barbie doll. He followed her gaze and saw a half-meter-tall Barbie doll on display behind the glass. He sighed. He really didn't like shopping. Walking around the mall wasn't about spending money, it was just tiring. If the princess room had already been decorated, Mason wouldn't have taken Elena out for such a long stroll. You're the best big brother ever. I like you the most. Elena beamed happily. Of course, she added with a cheeky grin, if you didn't buy me anything, wouldn't that make you a bad big brother? Then I might stop liking you. Mason sighed but still decided to walk into the toy store. Elena had no idea what he was thinking. She simply bounced along beside him excitedly. I'll take that Barbie doll, Mason said the moment they stepped inside, pointing directly at the one Elena wanted. Oh, sweetheart, the clerk smiled, that's a limited global edition. Before she could finish, Mason calmly pulled out a diamond tier card and handed it over. The clerk's smile grew even brighter. Of course, sir. One moment, I'll wrap it up for you. Mason gave a cool nod, then led Elena over to a sofa to sit and wait. You're the best big brother ever. Elena cheered again and gave him a big kiss on the cheek. The sudden gesture made Mason's face flush red. He had no idea why his face was heating up, but he quickly cleared his throat and said sternly, You're not allowed to kiss just anyone, understand? I know, Elena replied sweetly. I only kiss my mommy, daddy, and family. Mason didn't know what else to say. She was so obedient and innocent, he felt oddly satisfied. Soon after, the clerk returned with the doll carefully wrapped. Elena insisted on carrying it herself, and so, in the middle of the large, busy shopping mall, a very peculiar scene unfolded. A tiny little girl struggling to carry a Barbie doll nearly as big as herself, followed by a handsome young boy with a helpless expression. People all around found it adorable. Several young adults even pulled out their phones to snap pictures of the cute pair. When the two children returned home, Mr. and Mrs. Lancaster had just arrived as well, seeing Elena dragging the giant Barbie box behind her. Mrs. Lancaster quickly stepped forward to help. Let me carry that for you, sweetheart, she said gently. Hurry, help him bring her in to rest, she added, turning to Mason. Mason, why didn't you help her carry it? She's just a little girl, you should be taking care of her, you know that? Mrs. Lancaster scolded Mason gently while feeling sorry for Elena. Mason didn't bother to explain. He already knew exactly what was about to happen. Sure enough, Elena hugged the Barbie doll tightly and refused to let go. Elena wants to carry her Barbie all by herself. It's mine, she said stubbornly. Mrs. Lancaster was stunned for a moment by the little girl's intense reaction. Then she quickly reassured her with a soft voice. Oh, sweetheart, I wasn't taking it away from you. I just wanted to help you bring it up to your room. Elena looked at Mrs. Lancaster for a few seconds, as if evaluating whether she could be trusted. Eventually, she hesitated, and then finally loosened her grip. Mrs. Lancaster chuckled softly as she took the big doll from the girl's tiny arms. She's so small, but still managed to carry this all the way home? I don't know how she did it. As she turned to head upstairs, Elena suddenly ran into her arms and hugged her tightly. Auntie Dee, I missed you so much, she said sweetly. I missed you too, Elena, Mrs. Lancaster replied, hugging her back warmly. Then she paused for a second. Wait. Did she not see me earlier? Auntie Dee, why are you here? Elena asked with a pouty smile. Did you come just to visit me? She rubbed her little face into Mrs. Lancaster's neck, clinging to her like a kitten. Her soft, sweet voice melted the woman's heart. The truth was, Elena had been here once before, but she was only 2 years old at the time and didn't remember anything. After that, it had always been Mr. and Mrs. Lancaster visiting the John family. As for Mason, he had refused to go for reasons only he knew. That's why Elena remembered Mr. and Mrs. Lancaster, but didn't recognize Mason. "This is Auntie Dee's house," Mrs. Lancaster said softly. "From now on, you'll live here, okay?" Spending years with her mischievous husband had rubbed off on her. She was now just a little bit cunning as she gently coaxed Elena. Elena nodded innocently. "Okay. But only if I can have a princess room." She still had no idea about her real situation, completely carefree and full of smiles. "No problem," Mrs. Lancaster beamed. "Auntie Dee will take you to it right now." The truth was, she had known in advance that Elena would be coming. She had simply been too busy to pick her up herself. Mason understood all too well that his parents had no intention of sending Elena back. That's the only reason he had agreed to let Mr. John bring her in the first place. She got the dreamy princess room she'd always wanted, and Elena ended up staying at Mason Lancaster's home for the next 8 years. By the time Mason turned 18 and was preparing to study abroad, it was finally time for them to part ways. He had thought that leaving Elena behind might bring him some relief, some sense of freedom, but it wasn't until he stood in the airport, watching her cry uncontrollably, that he realized he had completely underestimated the weight of the bond they shared over those 8 years. "Please, don't leave me, Mason." Elena clung tightly to his waist, refusing to let go. Mason tried to gently pry her arms away, sighing in helplessness. "I'm not leaving you forever, Elena. I'll be back. I promise." Why is she always this clingy? He wondered silently. She had been a handful for years, but not like this. Back when she was 12, had she ever cried like this before? Still, something in his chest ached watching her like this. Hearing his soft reassurance, Elena finally stopped crying, hiccuping as she asked, "Really? You're not lying? You've never lied to me, have you, Mason?" He looked down at the girl he had basically raised for 8 years. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying, and his heart felt like it was being squeezed. No matter how annoying she had been all those years, he had never once yelled at her, never once hit her, never even scolded her harshly. "I'll be back soon," she whispered. "When?" she asked, looking up at him, eyes still glistening with tears. "Soon," Mason replied, avoiding a specific answer, because truthfully, he didn't know how long he'd be gone. But after this moment, this gut-wrenching goodbye, he knew one thing for certain: he would come back as soon as he could, because in that very moment, he realized something he had never admitted before. He had never once seen Elena as just a little sister. All those years, even when he was away visiting home, she had been by his side nearly every day, and over time, being without her just felt wrong. After saying goodbye to his family, Mason finally turned and walked into the airport. As for Elena, she returned to her usual cheerful self soon after. Sure, at first, she felt a little lost without Mason nearby, but in time, she made new friends, and eventually, she stopped thinking about him altogether. If Mason had known that Elena would forget him so quickly, while he was suffering in silence on the other side of the world, he might have been angry enough to jump on the next flight back. 6 years had passed in the blink of an eye. Now, Elena was sitting on the bleachers, sucking on a lollipop, her eyes fixed on a boy playing basketball on the court. The lollipop in her mouth was from Mason Lancaster. Even after all these years, he still remembered to send her candy from abroad. Back when she first started school, she came home one day with a whole bag of snacks given to her by the boys in her class. From that day forward, Mason started gathering the best sweets and snacks to send her regularly, hoping she wouldn't get too easily won over by anyone else. Even after going overseas, he never forgot to send his care packages. Deep down, he was terrified that one day, someone might actually steal her away. Elsewhere, at Camden International Airport, Mason had just landed and was impatient to see Elena again. The moment he stepped off the plane, he turned to his assistant. "Get me all the latest information about Elena now." The assistant returned quickly. "Boss, here's the most recent update on Miss Elena." As he spoke, his voice grew smaller and smaller, his forehead beginning to bead with sweat. He knew all too well how much his boss treasured Elena, and now she seemed to like someone else. He couldn't even imagine how furious Mason would be once he found out. She's into someone?" Mason asked, his voice unnervingly calm. "Why yes, it seems she's had her eyes on a boy lately." The assistant mumbled, shrinking under Mason's icy glare. "Perfect. Mason clenched his jaw, trying hard not to explode on the spot. If it weren't for sheer self-control, he might have ripped the poor assistant apart already. Damn it, I was only gone a few years. Just a few. Why can't she just behave herself for once? Who does she like? Mason demanded coldly. This was no time to lose his temper. This was the time to bring his fiancée back where she belonged. He's one of her classmates. Name's Asher Pierce, the assistant answered nervously. He's a finance major. Top of his class. Polite, responsible, excellent academic record. And, he's good-looking too. Mason's face grew darker with each word. The assistant, Hayden, kept talking without realizing the storm brewing right in front of him. He even saved Miss Elena once. From a group of thugs. That's when she really started noticing him. Hayden. Mason's voice was deadly calm. I'm giving you one last chance. Get to the point. Hayden immediately shut up, realizing he'd said far too much. Handsome, huh? Of course, that would be her type. Mason's lip curled in annoyance. All these years and she still hasn't changed one bit. All she ever cared about were good looks. Maybe she only likes him because she feels grateful. Hayden Wright tried to analyze the situation aloud, but the moment the words left his mouth, he felt the temperature in the room drop several degrees. That's enough. You can leave now. And don't bother yourself with this again. Mason Lancaster waved him off coldly, left alone in his office. Mason sat quietly, emotions swirling. On one hand, he was proud, his little girl had finally grown up. On the other hand, he was annoyed. Grown up didn't mean free to flirt with anyone. What he didn't know was that Elena didn't even know about their engagement. The betrothal had been arranged when she was just a month old. Everyone always assumed she knew about it, so no one had ever mentioned it again. After a long flight, Mason finally collapsed onto his bed. Just before drifting off to sleep, he whispered to the ceiling, Elena. Silly girl. You're mine. Only mine. Meanwhile, Elena had absolutely no idea that someone had been keeping such a close eye on her all this time. She was currently sitting on the school lawn with Asher Pierce. The two, an undeniably attractive pair, drew admiration from many passers-by, but also more than a little jealousy. From a distance, Violet Sinclair watched them laughing together, her grip on her phone tightening until it nearly cracked. A cold smirk formed on her lips. A plan was already beginning to take shape in her mind. The last time Elena was ambushed by those thugs, that was Violet's doing, but Asher had ruined everything, not only saving her, but getting closer to her afterward. This time, Violet wouldn't just let it end with a lesson. That afternoon, Elena had no classes, so she returned home. Since starting university, she only came home during long breaks. The rest of the time, she stayed in the dorms, mostly to avoid people finding out her real identity as the mayor's daughter. She didn't want the unnecessary trouble or attention. Elena, sweetheart, wake up. Her mother, Mrs. Collette, gently shook her daughter, who was fast asleep, still half asleep. Elena rubbed her eyes and mumbled, Mom? What's going on? Hurry up, darling, Mrs. Collette said, her voice a mix of excitement and urgency. We have a guest downstairs. I still groggy. Elena slowly made her way downstairs. Sitting quietly in her room, Elena suddenly heard footsteps coming down the stairs. Her heart skipped a beat with nervous anticipation. But before she could say anything, she saw a man already seated on the sofa. No, scratch that. She flopped down onto the sofa herself, not even glancing at him. You greet guests like that, huh? Mason Lancaster looked at her, half amused, half helpless. That voice. Why does it sound so familiar? Elena rubbed her eyes, confused, and as her vision cleared, her whole face lit up. If she had to describe him in one word, it would be Prince. Wait. The more she looked at him, the more familiar he seemed. Mason didn't say anything. He just smiled at her quietly. Elena kept trying to remember, but her mind was blank. So she asked directly, have we met before? What do you think? Mason suddenly stepped closer. He stopped just inches from her face, barely 5 centimeters between them. His eyes gazed into hers, warm and intense. Elena, uncomfortable with how close he was, instinctively turned her head to the side. You really don't remember? He asked, his voice soft but tinged with pain. That's a little heartbreaking. He sighed and sat down on the sofa across from her. Though he tried to act lighthearted, there was a genuine twinge of disappointment in his heart. The girl he had missed for so long, finally in front of him, and she didn't even recognize him. How could he not feel a little hurt? He had imagined this reunion 1,000 different ways, but never thought it would turn out like this. He could tell she still wasn't fully awake. Just one look at her told him that. I'm sorry, Elena mumbled. I really don't remember. Please don't be upset. It's alright, Mason said casually. Truthfully, he wasn't mad, but Elena still felt awkward and a little guilty. She wanted to ask who he was, but couldn't quite find the words. Thankfully, at that moment, Mrs. Collette walked in with a plate of fruit. Mason, sweetheart, she smiled, come have some fruit. You're staying for dinner, okay? And finally, it clicked. Elena froze, wide-eyed. Wait. You're my brother? Her voice trembled with disbelief, and then, the floodgates opened, a sudden wave of emotion rushed over her. She had been just a little girl back then, too young to understand what "I'll be back soon" really meant. Who would have thought that soon would stretch into so many years? No, she hadn't truly forgotten Mason Lancaster, she just assumed he had lied to her little heart and disappeared forever. The more she thought about it, the more her eyes filled with tears, and soon, the tears were falling uncontrollably, streaming down her cheeks faster than she could wipe them away. Hey. What's wrong? Don't cry. This time, Mason panicked a little, but Elena, crying harder than ever, threw herself into his arms. You said you'd be back soon. I waited for you for so long. But you never came back. If something feels off, let us know in the comments so we can make every story even better, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.